Okay, yeah, no, I was really intrigued. I was really interested there, Ian. I feel like that's such a contrast to the movie that I'm about to talk about, which is The Craft. And this came out, in 1996. And I think it still remains popular. So it's basically, for those that don't know, it's an American teen supernatural horror film, directed by Andrew Fleming, based from a different screenplay. And it's basically, it stars Robin Tunney, Neve Campbell, Rachel True, my gosh. And it's basically four outcast teenage girls in an LA high school who pursue witchcraft for their own gain and subsequently experience negative repercussions as a result. And the reason why I like this movie is because I felt like it covered an aspect of a Wicca paganism that they highlight in the movie. It covers that aspect. I don't want to say in a realistic view, but they use certain terms like the three by three. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, Sika, where Wiccans.
They really played into all of the tropes.
Yes,
I'm just gonna say, like, every Wiccan possible thing that you could think of was in that movie.
It so was, and that's what I liked about it. And it just came around at that time, was perfect in the 90s. I honestly believe we were going through that phase where everybody was into Buffy and Angel. Everybody was into that, having a supernatural.
It hasn't changed much.
Oh, it hasn't.
No, and I think there's a new, like, The Craft. There's a new one that came out in 2020.
Yes,
so
there is.
I think they kind of revisited it, or maybe it's like the renewal or something. Like it's new group of girls, but the same concept, right?
Right. I think there's another series out there. Oh gosh, what's it called? I can't remember, but oh gosh, it's.
Well, there's been so many. I mean,
but there is. Yeah, there's been too many, but. But I think this is the best one. I don't know. I love the soundtrack. I really sort of enjoyed all of it. I don't know if anyone knows the general gist of the plot, but the three girls are not very popular in school, and they all worship a powerful deity they call Manon, and they spot one of the girls that's new to the school, Sarah. She levitates a pencil in class, and then the group is convinced that she's the right girl to complete that coven as the fourth making of a coven. So they kind of convince her to get involved with what they're doing, and sort of introduce her to paganism and witchcraft and Wicca. And it all sort of goes a little south once they start practicing magic, but at first they think it's great. Things are starting to go their way. Scars are starting to leave. They're becoming more popular. Someone that didn't fancy, was attracted to Sarah before is now attracted to her, like the famous boy, so popular boy. So I think I liked it for the time. I think it definitely had a ripple effect on the Wiccan community. I think there was definitely a lot more interest in the Wiccan community after this movie came out, just from my own personal observations. When it came out in 1996, I was just going to college. I was a goth myself. And I liked it for that. But oh my gosh, I used to roll my eyes at people that was like, oh, I'm a witch too. I've seen The Craft. It's like, that doesn't instantly make you a Wiccan or a pagan.
Let's talk about the reality.
Sure.
Right?
Before we leave Hollywood and go to reality, there's another franchise there's another franchise we need to talk about.
Sure.
Okay.
That is the Harry Potter movies.
Right.
Oh, is that? Well, aren't they wizards?
True enough.
Well, they're wizards.
Wizard,
warlock,
right? I mean, it's just kind of a male attribute to, and I mean, Hermione was a girl. She would have been considered a witch.
Yeah. Some of the, I can't think of some of the teachers, but the old woman was a witch. But what's really cool.
Yes.
other than the fact that, you know, the Harry Potter movies are great movies,
Mhm.
And Charmed as
in
well.
terms of the witches, it's
Wasn't that?
interesting that they're portrayed as normal people, normal kids, normal
Right.
boys and girls, normal men
Yeah.
and women,
Mhm.
as opposed to, you know, these evil hags that you know, that practice, you know, magic and witchcraft. And
Hmm.
Well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, when we get into it, as I was saying, it's, you know, it kind of goes, I mean, but then Harry Potter did have some of that in it too, right?
oh, sure,
Yeah.
it did, yeah,
It did have that sort of the two sides of things. And you know, and then there was an English, a UK show, and I want to remember what it was called now. It's like Girls of Trinity or whatever. But and I really feel like Harry Potter was a massive ripoff of that show.
Yeah.
Because that show was out long before Harry Potter, and I just feel like it's the, you know, that was sort of how Harry Potter came about.
Oh yeah.
But Saint Trinians, the girl, yeah, and so it was, you know, a whole school of witches, and you know, so we have all that. Then of course we have things like American Horror Story, who introduced a season essentially around witches and Wiccan and those beliefs, and of course Stevie Nicks popped into the show just to legitimize the whole thing.
Oh.
You know, because she's well known as being a white witch, and so she, you know, she made her appearance on the show. Now, so let's talk about where we sort of come from in history, right? Witches. What exactly are they? Who are they? How did they develop? Why do we see them in a certain way today? And you know, what makes witches today different or the same as witches 5, 6, 8, 1,000 years ago? And that's an interesting question, because I actually have relatives who were, well, one of my my grandmother's family members was Sarah Good in Salem, who was one of the first women accused of witchcraft there. And then I have also relations in a UK Scottish book of witches that kept a list of people that they thought were witches. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. But outside of that, you know, who were these people? Were they men? Were they women? I think it depends on the culture that you look at, right? Because in some cultures, it seems to be more of a male dominated field of practice. And then we have what we sort of look at as the European or the Celtic, which is what I think most people are most comfortable with, right? Because there's many cultures. I mean, Africa, China, you know, you name it, across the world. But I think what happened in the mythos of reality is that most of these people were women. And why were they women? It's because women were the ones who nurtured the household. So they were the ones that carried the knowledge for medicines and medicinals and using plants and you know, different things as medicinals. And so we end up with, when we start to see the rise of Christianity, we start to see this being looked at as a negative thing. As science and religion initially were somewhat interconnected way back when, we start to see the movement towards modern science or modern medicine, and these people practicing these old sort of folk remedies are starting to, you know, become persecuted because they're not following, they're not towing the line, they're not even Christian at this point, right? So they could be Celtic, they could be Druids, they could be Goths or Visigoths, or all of the multiples of different, you know, people that were out there at that time. So when, let's just be really real here, when Christianity rolled in, this is when we start to see all of this becoming a problem. And, you know, we can't really go back in time and go, well, you know, in like whatever time, they were still considered to be bad or evil or what. We actually don't have any written evidence of that. We can go back to some Sumerian text, and we can look at some cuneiform, some Sumerian text. They talk about witchcraft, but again, it's not considered evil or bad, or
Right.
it's talked about in a way that is often more beneficial than it is non. So we start to see the introduction of the church, and I really hate to say it, but the Christian church has a lot to answer for over the centuries.
Oh no.
Many things.
Mhm.
And their persecution of witches is one of those things, because most of these people were not doing anything wrong. These people were helping to heal people. They were trying to
Right.
keep their families alive. They were often older women. And why were they older women? Well, because at this stage in our lives, when we get to, and I mean, heck, most women would be lucky to hit my age in those times, right? But 50-year-old woman back in 1000 or 950 would have been considered an old woman. She was old. She'd been around for 50 years, and she had accumulated knowledge of how to look after her family, what plants were good to help certain things, if you got a bug bite, or you had a stomach ache, or you had a headache. So this was an accumulative knowledge. So this is why we always end up with these images of these old lady hags, as
Right.
and I know that now, we look at it in sort of the three phases, right? You've got, your crone, and you've got
Maid, the mother, and the crone.
That's right. The maid, the mother, and the crone. Exactly. So the young, literally mother age, and then the crone. And Hollywood really plays with this. But in history, I think for the most part, these people were targeted particularly by the church. I mean, the Spanish Inquisition is a perfect example of that. After or before Elizabeth came to the throne in England, and Lizzie the Oneth, right? We had Mary, Bloody Mary, right?
Oh, yeah.
Staunch Catholic, who
A staunch
again,
Catholic. Yeah.
was known for her persecution of people who didn't want to be Catholic. And so whether they were a witch or not, that was a perfect way to label them so that they would be executed, moved out of the way, and this is really where it came into play. I mean, persecution was huge. And so we have the Catholic Church rolling through history, as they do. And
as they do. Okay.
Laying down their rules and regulations and how these things work. And quite frankly, to me, it's nonsense.